Welcome back, folks. I want to talk a little bit more about buying horses because my last video, I got a few positive comments on, but it barely even scratched the surface. There's so much more. And in this video, you're probably going to occasionally see me looking at a little notepad here because I don't want to forget what I'm going to talk about. And, well, even this is certainly not going to be everything. There's going to be, even if you take the last two videos, put them together, probably not even half of what you need to know about buying a horse. And, well, I'm not an expert about that. There's other people that can tell at a glance whether or not the horse is suitable to buying. And, well, for me, I'm not that good at identifying certain lamenesses and good conformation and that sort of thing. If it's furry and has four legs, it's a horse. Yeah. Well, that's not my area of specialty, and like I said, there's specialties of all kinds when it comes to horses, and picking one out is pretty important. And one thing you have to consider when you're buying a horse is the fact that, you're probably going to have that horse for, well, they can live over 50 years. Now, that's not very common. The average lifespan's only about 25, but still, the horse, you can have a rideable life very easily 15 years. And you want to make sure you get the right horse, the right one for you anyhow. So I want to talk about some things to watch out for. If you don't know a whole lot about horses, well, actually, even if you do know a fair bit, a second set of eyes doesn't hurt. So if you know somebody that's quite knowledgeable about horses and can spot a lot of different things, but, without too much investigation, take them along with you to help you pick out a horse. Can't hurt, but just because they say they know lots about horses doesn't mean they do, of course. But, if you've known them for a while and they've proven to you to be pretty knowledgeable when it comes to horses, absolutely take them along with you. Would not hurt at all. If the only person I know is quite a distance away, but I'd still take somebody with me. Don't think that that's a rookie thing. Actually, a rookie mistake is not taking somebody with you. So by all means, if you can get somebody that knows what they're looking at to go with you, take them along. So when you get there, well, I talked about some of the things you got to be cautious about in the other video, but look the horse over and, something you might want to investigate in a little is you might want to have a vet check done. You might want to have some blood tests done to detect genetic disorders and things like that. And if the owner at any time says, no, you can't do that, walk away. They're hiding something. If they're agreeable, it's a bit of a delay, and it might make a difference between whether or not you miss out on a deal, but it's worth it, is to get a vet check done. Now, I got to caution you about vet checks a little bit because, vets don't know everything. They're not God, and they can make mistakes, and honestly, their training is horribly inadequate for the job they have to do, and that's not their fault. But, your human doctor, well, they get twice as much education to deal with one species. A vet has to deal with a dozen different species and gets half as much education. Not real fair to them. Unless they've got lots of experience under their belt, it's pretty easy to make a mistake or not know what they're looking at. Now, I don't know what they charge for a vet check, but even if it's a couple $100, that might be money well spent in the long run. It's kind of like a lot of people do is when they're buying a car, they take it to a reputable mechanic and have it all checked out to make sure it's actually fit to purchase. Do the same thing with your horse. But, a vet check isn't everything. Don't make your, it is a contributing factor in your decision, but don't let it guide your decision exclusively because, like I said, they can make mistakes. Hello, Helen. And, sometimes they're wrong, sometimes they overlook things, depending on their experience. They might not know what they're looking at. One thing I want to caution you about is one test that some vets do, not very many anymore apparently, and some have never even heard of it, is something called a flex test, where they take the front leg of the horse and they bend it at the knee and they pretty much tight around and then hold it there for a predetermined amount of time and then let it go and then ask the horse to trot. Well, I'm afraid that almost all horses are going to fail that one, and that's kind of been determined. And so if you see your vet doing that and they fail a horse based on that, well, first off, you might question your vet if they're doing that. And, well, if they fail the horse based on that test alone, ignore the results, because that test is not going to be conclusive in any way, shape, or form. It's kind of like sitting on your leg and then trying to get up and walk. It's very similar to that is what's going on. And, nice kitty. Got about 5 barn cats out here, all very social. Well, some of them are anyhow. Obviously, that one is. And that didn't work well. So if they happen to, do something like that, like I said, don't let the vet check itself deter you from buying the horse entirely. Don't let it be a make or break deal. And I'll get into a little story I just recently read about that on that subject. Another thing is I actually saw a horse that recently failed a vet check, because it wouldn't trot. Unfortunately, the particular vet that looked at the horse was quite young and inexperienced, and they did not realize that particular horse was gaited and it didn't trot. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the horse, but it failed the vet check because of that. And the person that was buying it was quite a ways away, so they were going by the vet check because they didn't even see the horse in person. A second vet came out, much more knowledgeable, obviously passed the horse. And I watched it during that time, and man, that was a nice moving horse. Beautiful. Smooth as silk. Even when she went into a canter, the back just floated along in a perfectly straight line. There was no bouncing around on that horse. Nice. Anyhow, so another story was that I just recently read. A horse failed a vet check when they were trying to sell it. And as a result, and it didn't actually at that time have anything wrong with it, but it potentially had something that could develop because something in it. I don't remember exactly what it was. They had a hard time selling it. Finally sold it for pretty cheap. The girl that bought it, bless her, had the horse for a while, and it was trained up real good and everything too. I believe it was a jumper or something like that. Eventually, there was a rider that needed a mount, and she gave the horse away to this guy so that he could ride this horse. Well, he went on to compete in the Olympics and actually went on to win for many years with that horse, and that horse never once had any lameness that they predicted may happen due to this vet check. So the horse was eventually retired, and I do believe it has passed away since, but I think it was still competing into its 20s. So, and that was a horse that failed a vet check, so just a little warning there. It became an Olympic champion. That was a horse that failed. Anyhow, so there's your vet check. That's something you want to be cautious of. And on the suggestion of vet checks, and you might want to have blood tests done, that sort of thing. And there's particularly certain breeds, well, just about all breeds actually have diseases or conditions, genetic disorders exclusive to that breed, and you may very well want to get blood tests done to determine if that horse has those conditions. And I think that would be a wise thing to do. Do some homework on different breeds. If there's a certain breed in particular you're interested in, do some homework on it. Find out what type of conditions and diseases it's predisposed to. And why are you chewing? Ouch, that hurts. Why are you chewing on my thumb? Does it taste good? Anyhow, there she goes again. I'm going to hide that one. So do your homework, find out what the horse is predisposed to, and have it blood tested to see if it has the genetic markers for it. Don't let it scare you off completely, though, because even if the horse has it's positive, unless it's an offspring of 2 positive horses, quite often it's nothing to worry about. But it is still something to definitely be cautious about. It's something that a lot of the things that I've heard about don't manifest until later in life, and then they become completely debilitating to the horse. And in some cases, you actually have to have the horse put down. It can no longer do whatever it was you wanted it to do. Now, another thing about buying a horse is before you even go looking for a horse, what are you going to use it for? What do you need, for a horse? What's your discipline? Are you going to be a jumper, a barrel racer, or you want a trail ride? There's just a lot of things, and depending on what you want to do with the horse, might determine whether or not that horse is suitable. If you want a really good, steady Eddie trail horse, which, by the way, a lot of people frown on the trail horse. They look down on it, and I don't understand, because it actually takes a really good horse to make a good trail horse. But back to what I was saying, if you're looking for a trail horse and somebody's got a real good barrel horse, but it's had some chronic issues, physical issues, ailments that, basically render it no longer good as a barrel horse, you might actually be able to pick up that horse pretty cheap, and it may actually still be 100% fit for trail riding, as long as you're not riding hard and turning quick circles and stuff like that. So there's a lot of factors you got to consider, and one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they buy way more horse than they need to. If you want to take up jumping, and your abilities or your comfort zone says you're going to be jumping about that high. Well, you don't need a horse that can jump that high, and that might make $5,000-$10,000 difference in the amount of money you're going to have to spend when you buy that horse. So don't buy more than you need. That's the thing that I always say is unfortunately some rich families they're prone to doing that. They'll buy one of the kids a horse that's basically what we refer to as a maid horse, where, in spite of how good or bad the rider actually is, the horse could still do the jumps or barrels or pulls or whatever pattern without a rider, and in cases that has happened. But, like I said, don't go buy yourself a $10,000 horse if you only need a $5,000 horse. Don't buy a $5,000 horse if you only need a $1,000 horse. And to be quite honest, if you're spending $5,000, $10,000 on a horse, man, you got a lot more money than I do. And, you could easily get a decent horse, depending on what you're going into. Entry-level horse, you could very easily get a decent horse for $1,000 or less. And when you get into that price range, please, don't haggle price. I don't know how many times I've seen that happen. Somebody gets quoted $800 for a horse, they want to give them $600. It's like, hey, come on, $800 doesn't pay 2 months' board. That's the purchase price of the horse is probably one of the smallest prices that you're ever going to put out. You can get a perfectly good horse for $1,000. You're gonna, training alone is worth far more than that for a good horse. You can easily run up way more than $1,000 on a vet bill. $1,000, you're lucky if that buys you a good saddle. So please, if you're getting a horse, $1,000, even $1,500, even $2,000, if it meets your needs, if it's what you want for a horse, don't argue price. Just buy the thing, because believe me, down the road, that's going to be chicken feed the amount of money you're spending on the purchase of the horse. I've often said that the purchase price is the smallest expense of a horse. And I know because I've got two that were given to me, and they have cost me thousands and thousands of dollars. Free horses. No such thing as a free horse, by the way. Don't get more horse than you need. That's, one of the things I always say. A lot of people think that they need to have a, 17, 18 hand high horse because it looks flashy having a big horse. But they're not entirely practical depending on what you're doing with them, because you get a horse that size, you can't get on them from the ground. Either somebody's got to give you a leg up, or you need to use a mounting block. And if you ever decide to use that horse for trail riding, that's not very practical at all. Because, where I live here, you can see the background. It's pretty flat out here. And, you can go for literally miles before you find something to stand on to get back on your horse. So a horse that requires a mounting block or a leg up, that's not very practical at all. And if you go trail riding with somebody else that also has a tall horse like that, well, they can get off and give you a hand getting on yours, but then how are they going to get back on theirs? So anyhow, don't buy more horse than you need. There are horses out there that you can spend, $10, $20, $30,000 on. Good barrel horses, that sort of thing. I've seen race horses can easily go for $250,000. People will spend thousands and thousands of dollars on horses that don't even have any training yet, just on potential. That was another thing I was going to caution about. I didn't put in my notes is do not buy potential. You will see many ads that say the horse is a barrel prospect or a cow prospect or whatever. Prospect doesn't mean a darn thing. My car could be a drag racing prospect if I had enough money to spend on it. It's just prospect doesn't really mean anything, and that kind of goes back to something else I was going to talk about: bloodlines and breeding. People think that horses of a certain bloodline or a certain breeding automatically are going to make them good at something. That's not true at all. You could get some grade horse of unknown breeding that turns out to be the best jumper or cow horse or whatever you've ever seen. Breeding doesn't mean a thing. They could be a complete dud. Breeding and bloodlines can lead you down the road of good potential to become successful at what they're doing, but it's never, absolutely never, ever a guarantee. So please, whatever you do, do not buy potential. If the horse isn't even trained yet, you have no idea whether or not it's going to be any good. Whatever. So. Just because somebody tells you, oh yeah, I got one that's reigning cutting bred. Well, is he any good at that yet? Well, actually, I don't think he's ever going to be, just because of his personality, and he's not been trained for any of that yet. I could say he's a prospect. I could be full of it too, because we don't know until he actually does it. And from what I know about horses, based on his personality, I don't think he's ever going to be particularly successful. So that's another one you got to watch is, don't buy, based on breeds. Oh, another thing I was going to talk about too was color. Aside from, getting your heart set on certain breeds, which might not necessarily be a good idea either, because you might also find that there are certain breeds that excel at things that they aren't particularly good at, or not typically anyhow. People have done dressage on everything from Icelandics to thoroughbreds to mules. Actually, I think there was one time they even did it on a Clydesdale. Go figure. Anyhow, so, don't get stuck on you absolutely have to have a certain breed. Now, there are certain breeds, of course, that are better suited to certain disciplines. The much taller breeds, obviously, would be better for jumping. When it comes to cutting, reining, stuff like that, some of the short, stocky, athletic ones are going to excel at that. You won't see too many very big reining horses. Could you do it on a big one? I don't know, probably. I think you could probably do it on any horse if it's got the personality for it. But color is another thing that people get hung up on. And one of the things that, there's myths about color, too, that color determines temperament and health and strength and physical abilities and all sorts of things. That's all myth. Color is nothing but pigmentation. And it should never, ever be a determining factor when you're purchasing a horse. Do I have favorite colors? Oh, absolutely. I think most people do. And there are definitely certain horses that I actually like based on their color. In fact, I own one that I bought primarily because of her coloring. She was a very pretty horse. I'm guilty. I've done it. So I know. But coloring is nothing but pigmentation. It has absolutely zero to do with how good that horse is for anything. So don't buy a horse based on color, and also don't buy it based on breed. There's no guarantee anything of in that department. And on the note of coloring, there's another one I want to talk about is the hooves, because even people that are very knowledgeable and skilled, been around for a long time when it comes to horses, There's lots of people, even people that do trims and farriers and such, still think that black hooves are harder than white ones. And I have no idea where they get that notion from, because there's absolutely zero evidence to support that. None whatsoever, because it's absolutely nothing but pigmentation. And I have seen I do my own trims, so I don't get around as much as, say, a farrier or trimmer would, but, from personal experience, I've seen black hooves that'll just crumble, some that are soft, some that are hard. I've seen white hooves that are so hard I could barely cut them. So coloring absolutely does not make a difference. It's just prejudice. You prejudge something based on color. It's about as silly as saying redheads have bad tempers. And that's absolutely not true. And you ask any redhead and they'll tell you, and if you don't listen, they'll smack you one. Anyhow, pigmentation, there have been tests on the hooves that determine that the makeup and structure, everything about that hoof is identical regardless of color. It's nothing more than pigmentation, has absolutely no effect on the structure or strength of it. That is probably far more determined by things like diet, activity, the terrain, and sometimes even the breeding too, because genetically there are certain breeds that do have better feet than others. And I'm not going to go into my opinion on that, because even the ones that are known to have bad feet, some of them have good feet too. But just don't fall for that one that, the black ones are hard and the white ones are bad. That's another thing. I think a lot of people miss out on some really good horses. A perfect example is, there's one horse out here that I think is a marvelous horse. And I don't even know how much the owner paid for that one, but he's just a mixed breed, generic, nothing special horse. But I'll tell you, he's a good horse. And a lot of people had turned that horse down because he's not registered purebred and he's not flashy and all that stuff. But you want a good, reliable horse, man, you don't have to spend a whole lot. Sometimes you get lucky and you can be in the right place at the right time, get one for a few $100s, depending on what you're looking for. Age will make a big difference. The older it gets, the cheaper it gets. For some reason, people got this silly notion that horses in their teens are seniors. I don't know where the heck they get that from. They aren't seniors until they're well into their 20s. And in fact, it's not until they hit their teens that they actually peak in their intelligence. They get settled emotionally and they're fully developed physically. A lot of people get into horses that are way too young to be any good for anything, in my opinion. And physically, they haven't even finished developing until about the age of 6. So I don't think a horse is, just my opinion on this one here, but I don't think a horse is particularly good for riding until probably at least 8. And they get real good past 10, probably close to 13 is when they get really good. So, don't let the age of a horse turn you off. I've seen that a lot of times where people know, I want a much younger horse. They see a horse in late teens and they figure it's too old. It's like, yeah, heck no. I bought one that I was told was 23 because I figured it's going to have at least a few good years of riding in it, even at that age. And, it was a been there, done it horse. So, I didn't have to waste any time training. And, that was a horse you could hop on bareback, just throw a rope around his neck, and away you go. So it was a very practical horse. Very economical horse. Didn't cost a whole lot to buy, and I didn't have to buy a lot of fancy special tack for it either. Now, would that horse win anything? Probably not. Pretty ugly horse. Didn't have fancy skills, but it was very good at what it did. It was previously used for herding cattle in the bush, and you could ride that horse through a gate, and you would never ever bang your legs on the posts. That horse always knew how much room to give the rider. Very, very good, and that was from many years of experience. Don't get that with a young green horse. So, just a few more things to consider. Whatever you do, don't buy more horse than you need. Don't spend more on a horse than you need. you can, my suggestion is instead of buying a $5,000 horse, buy a $1,000 horse, and you got $4,000 left to look after that horse. Buy yourself a real nice saddle, pay for some training, and you still have some left over for vet care, supplements, and all kinds of good stuff like that. So you absolutely do not need a $5,000 horse. Spending more on a horse is not necessarily going to get you a better horse. In fact, my cheapest horse is one of the free ones I got given to me. Well, she's not very attractive. I would never have bought her. I don't like the color, the breed, the size, the conformation. Not much about that horse I care for. But at 26 years of age, she's still the healthiest horse I've got and has yet to ever require a vet. So, don't think for a minute that you have to get a certain breed, certain color, flashy looking horse, certain conformation. It can be helpful depending on what you're doing, absolutely. But don't rule out the horse that just might turn out to be the best darn horse you ever found. Okay, have a good day.